Hi, and welcome to this screencast for Physics 30S about how to design an experiment. So if I just pop over to our outcomes, I'm just going to highlight that this is the outcome that this screencast will address. So let's go, and there we go, and take a look at it. Our labs generally start all the same. We usually start with this purpose here. I'll just pause it and come back. To graphically and mathematically model the relationship between. That's how it always starts. And by the way, I sometimes, because we reuse this so often, to graphically and mathematically model the relationship between. Every once in a while you may hear me say TGAMMTRB. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's less than saying all the words. So in our lab that we started in class, we're going to be identifying the relationship between. Now, generally it is, we state the independent variable first, and then the dependent variable second. And in our lab, what were they? Well, we were actually looking at three relationships. We were looking at amplitude, how far back, either in angle or in distance, the pendulum was started, and period, the time for the back and forth. So that was the first one. The second one was mass and period. We may have in class said weight and period. That's fine, you can say that too. And the last one we had was length and period. And we'll come back to that in a bit. So before you can write the purpose, you'll notice that we have to identify this independent and the dependent variables. So how do you do that? Well, the first thing is, you know when something is the independent variable when we get to decide what it is. So looking back in our example, we get to choose where the pendulum starts, what the amplitude will be, and then we measure what the period is afterwards. We don't get to decide what the period is. The other thing is that the independent variable is independent. It is not affected by other variables. The dependent variable is, well, I guess we can say we don't decide. It's not like we can say, hey, how about in the next one we make the period 10 seconds? No, we set things up and then we measure what the period is. And it is dependent on on the other things. So we want to know if changes are going to happen to the period, to the dependent variable, depending on how we set things up. The last one, the controlled variables, are ones that we're going to try to keep the same. Keep constant. So in our example, what do we have? We have amplitude, mass, length, and period. So let's say that we're doing number one, amplitude and period. We want to keep all the other things that might have an effect the same. Okay, so in our example, I'm going to write here, since we have identified three variables that may have an effect on period. So what were those three variables? They were amplitude, mass, and length. So since we've identified those three, that when we are changing one of them, say amplitude, we keep the other ones controlled. We keep them constant. So let's, I should finish my sentence. Since we have identified three variables that may have an effect on period, we should change only one at a time. Let me give you an example for the controlled variables. Let's say that we were doing this first one here, that we were doing amplitude and period. Example, when trying relationship number 1, and that one is amplitude versus period, then keep, so what are the other things? Mass and length constant. And so you should actually state when you're doing this then. So you're saying, okay, amplitude and period. I'm going to say that this is my independent variable, this is my dependent variable, and then we would say my constants, or my controlled, maybe I should do that in red just to be consistent here. So controlled variables, and I would actually state what they were. I would say length equals, I don't know, maybe it was 30 centimeters, and mass equals maybe 200 grams. So when you collect your data, you should not only state which variables you're controlling, which ones you're making sure that you're keeping the same, but you should actually indicate what those measurements are. Okay, so now that we finished this video, you can go to the next page. There's a your turn, there's a practice, there's 3 examples, try them out, and then when you're done you can check the next page and see if you got them right. Thank you, and I'll see you in class.